its responsibility to the higher personality. So these are the fake personalities that are being created by Hitler, the higher, the lower, and so on, from the top down. However, it is stifled and incompletely realized because it is barred from entering political life by the antithetical principle of majority. Hence, Hitler argued, the best, and I'm quoting him now, the best state constitution and state form is that which raises the best minds in the national community to leading position and leading influence, unquote. Within a decade of the publication of these words, Hitler was to have the state that would displace private property as a shaper of human personality. Okay. I got a little more time, so let me just read the conclusion tied into the criticism of current policies. The German hyperinflation is a concrete example of how the destruction of property affected personality formation among a particular people in a given historical epoch. Nonetheless, it illustrates a link between property and personality that is based on universal principles of praxeology, the same science of human action that encompasses sound economics. In contrast, the mechanistic and hyper-mathematical discipline that is contemporary macroeconomics can never begin to fully grasp the full moral and social enormity of hyperinflation. Its narrowly specialized practitioners are not even conversant with all the branches of economic science, let alone the closely related disciplines of history, sociology, psychology, and philosophy. A working knowledge of the main conclusions of the latter disciplines is necessary for an economist who seeks to fully explain the causes and consequences of a complex economic event such as the German hyperinflation of 1923 or even the Great Depression of 1929. As Friedrich Hayek pointed out, quote, nobody can be a great economist who is only an economist. And I am even tempted to add that the economist who is only an economist is likely to become a nuisance, if not a positive danger. Okay. Certainly, macroeconomists like Bernanke, Krugman, and Mankiw are a positive danger in advocating that the central bank use or deliberately create inflationary expectations, which is what really is inherent to the dynamics of hyperinflation. Okay, when people lose confidence in the money, the fact that the demand for money falls is even more important towards the end of the hyperinflation than the increase in the money supply. In fact, prices are rising at such a great rate as a result of the fall in demand for money, the state can't even print enough money to allow people to pay those higher prices. Okay, so these people want to initiate this process because they don't want prices to fall by 1 or 2%. Okay, they're definitely afraid. Okay, and I call that deflation phobia. But there's also an important sense in which they are not really economists at all, these macroeconomists. From its beginning as a systematic science in the 18th century, the central concern of economics has always been scarcity. Yet as Hayek perceptively noted years ago, Keynes's economics, upon which modern macroeconomics is founded, quote, is a system of economics which is based on the assumption that no real scarcity exists. And the only scarcity with which we need concern ourselves is the artificial scarcity created by the determination of people not to sell their services and products below arbitrarily fixed prices. In Keynes's view, then, all productive resources, including all kinds of labor and capital, exist in superabundance, solely because there's a scarcity of money, in idle superabundance, solely because there's a scarcity of money available to set them to work. Hayek concluded, quote, the existence of interest in such a world would be due merely to the scarcity of money, although even money would not be scarce in any absolute sense. It would be scarce only relatively to given prices on which people were assumed to insist. So some of the plans, which are in the first part of my paper, which Mankiw calls for and Bernanke, and which are being put into play today, call for the actual taxing, at least in Mankiw's view, the taxing of people holding money. Okay, to put a tax, 10% tax on people holding money. And the way he would do that, very interesting, let me just read you how he would actually go about doing that, is to have the Fed announce that, let's say today, from 1 year from today, they're going to pick a number out of the hat, a numeral out of a hat between 0 and 9. Now, whatever number they pick out of the hat, that, if the bills you're holding ends in that numeral, they'll no longer be legal tender, they'll no longer be acceptable. So then that's a 10% tax on money. So what Mankiw then says is, well, then that will give people would be willing to get rid of their money to loan their money out, even at -2 or -3%. So you can actually make the nominal interest rate negative. Now, to be fair to Mankiw, this was on his blog. It wasn't in a scholarly article, and it was also sort of an exercise dreamed up by one of his graduate students. But he went on to say that this would work. This plan would work, and this plan actually goes back to Silvio Gesell, who is a crazed German monetary crank, who was a finance minister for the Communist Republic of Bavaria that lasted for 7 days. Okay. He was thrown in jail, then got out again. But he actually wanted to stamp money, have people have to bring money in every week to get it stamped, which meant that you had to pay for the stamp. So everybody would try to spend it all during the week. So, I mean, when macroeconomists are reaching for this kind of thing, you have to be worried about hyperinflation. Okay? So I'll stop there and take questions. I don't want to go too long. Okay. Questions? Comments? Yes?
You talked a lot about the social implications of economic policies. So on a similar line, would you say that decades of artificially low interest rates moved us toward a more present-oriented society or culture?
It's not so much the low interest rates themselves, because low interest rates would demonstrate that people are saving a lot. Okay, interest rates are determined by people's time preferences. A low interest rate reflects the fact that people value present goods relative to future goods less than they did before. So there's more savings, so interest rates will naturally fall. Okay. The problem is pushing the way that interest rates are artificially reduced brings about inflation, brings about a loss of confidence in money, and the feeling that one has to, especially with these bubbles, when you see prices of things going up very quickly, like houses or stocks, if you feel the compulsion to go spend that money now rather than later. So, yeah, there is. It's not the low interest rates themselves that cause low time preference, or that cause high time preference. They themselves are a reflection of lower time preferences, as Professor Murphy explained. Okay, but it's the driving of these interest rates, or driving them down by the creation of new money, which brings about the effects of inflation. Other questions, comments? Yes, Bob.
In addition to hyperinflation, I've noticed a similar thing too with the bailouts, like they're having with TARP, that even there'd be commercials about, come down to the electronics store and get your own bailout. And it just seemed like,
Yeah.
and people, like, it seemed like if you saved and whatever, played by the rules, you were a sucker.
Yeah, you're a sucker, right. As you were in Nazi Germany. I mean, rather in the Weimar Republic during the hyperinflation, you were a sucker the whole time. Brandon?
What sort of makeshifts did the people of Germany use and devise to survive and exchange? Did they revert to barter? Did they come up with other forms of currency, or did they just struggle?
They used money until the very end. I mean, you heard the stories of women having to take laundry baskets full of marked notes to the supermarket, to the grocery stores, and they would have to leave them outside because you just couldn't walk through the aisles. And when they did that, robbers would run by and dump the notes out and just take the basket, because the basket was worth more than all the notes. No, that's one of the problems. That's the stealing of the real things. The fact that a cup of coffee, the amount that you spent, let's say, on a dinner one night, that next morning, that you have to pay that same price for a cup of coffee. That's how quickly the prices were rising. So it's very hard to dislodge monetary calculation from people's consciousness, from the way they act and behave and so on. But as it becomes more and more chaotic, it deranges the human personality. I mean, there's no firm foundation for planning your life. So you see how important property is in that situation, and how human personality and individual